After a weekend of the Trump White House reportedly reeling in the shock of a New York Times report that White House counsel Don McGahn is a fully cooperating witness for Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, tonight the White House is trying to turn that big story around with a very big leak from the Trump legal team to the Washington Post. Tonight's Washington Post lead is White House counsel Don McGahn does not believe that he implicated President Trump in any legal wrongdoing. In extensive interviews he has given the special counsel, McGahn's attorney told Trump's legal team in recent days. That in recent days certainly sounds like it's in reaction to this weekend's reports by the New York Times. The Washington Post reveals that Don McGahn's criminal defense attorney, Bill Burke, sent an email to the Trump legal team in those recent days, in which Burke writes, quote, "He did not incriminate him." The Post reports McGahn's attorney, Bill Burke, told Trump's lawyers this past weekend that McGahn did not assert that Trump engaged in any wrongdoing. The New York Times revealed this weekend that Don McGahn submitted to at least 3 voluntary interviews with investigators that totaled 30 hours over the past 9 months. McGahn reportedly discussed the president's firing of National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the president's firing of FBI Director James Comey and the president's conflicts with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Times reports Mr. McGahn gave to Mr. Mueller's investigators, the People said, a sense of the president's mindset in the days leading to the firing of Mr. Comey, how the White House handled the firing of former National Security Advisor Michael T. Flynn, and how Mr. Trump repeatedly berated Mr. Sessions, tried to get him to assert control over the investigation, and threatened to fire him. Don McGahn's cooperation is central to the special prosecutor's investigation of possible obstruction of justice by the president. In a follow-up report after its original story, the New York Times reported that President Trump's lawyers don't know how much Don McGahn told the special prosecutor. Mr. Trump's lawyers realized on Saturday that they had not been provided a full accounting after the New York Times published an article describing Mr. McGahn's extensive cooperation with Mr. Mueller's office. After Mr. McGahn was initially interviewed by the special counsel's office in November, Mr. Trump's lawyers never asked for a complete description of what Mr. McGahn had said, according to a person close to the president. Yesterday, in what was, for reasons we will get to later, Rudy Giuliani's most spectacularly ridiculous TV interview ever, Giuliani actually admitted that the Trump lawyers do not know everything Don McGahn told the special prosecutor.
We have a good sense, obviously, of what Mr. McGahn testified to. I can figure it out from...
How do you say that good sense? Have you debriefed him?
No, but Mr. Dowd has a good sense of it. He talked to them at the time.
The Times reports that Rudy Giuliani refused to follow Trump's orders on television yesterday. The article set off a scramble on Saturday among Mr. Trump's lawyers and advisors. The president, sequestered at his private golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, solicited opinions from a small group of advisors on the possible repercussions from the article. The president ordered Mr. Giuliani to tell reporters that the article was wrong. But Mr. Giuliani did not go that far in his television appearances. Don McGahn, who was on Capitol Hill today with Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, ignored questions about this weekend's reports.
Why did you speak so long to the special counsel, Mr. McGahn?
Did you comply because you thought the president would betray you?
Do you regret that decision?
And like clockwork, when the news media reveals details of the Mueller investigation that disturb the president's tweeting becomes even more hysterical. This morning, the president tweeted these lies about Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller and his staff. Disgraced and discredited Bob Mueller and his whole group of angry Democrat thugs spent over 30 hours with the White House counsel, misspelled by the president. Only with my approval, for purposes of transparency. Anybody needing that much time when they know there is no Russian collusion is just someone looking for trouble. They are enjoying ruining people's lives and refuse to look at the real corruption on the Democrat side, the lies, the firings, the deleted emails, and so much more. Mueller's angry Dems are looking to impact the election. They are a national disgrace. Joining us now, Ken Dilanian, intelligence and national security reporter for NBC News, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, and an MSNBC contributor, and Ron Klain, former chief of staff to Vice Presidents Joe Biden and Al Gore, and a former senior aide to President Obama. And Jason Johnson, when a Trump tweet ends with national disgrace, a tweet that includes a misspelling by the president, it reminds me of the days when misspelling was a national disgrace, when done by the Vice President of the United States, Dan Quayle, on the word potato, days that no one can really remember at this point. Here's the president, and the only reason I read the tweet is to note the level of hysteria, which increases in direct proportion, it appears, to just how disturbed the president is by the news he's reading or being read to him in the New York Times.
Lawrence, you could almost say he was unhinged by the way he seems to be responding to these things.
You know, I, for one, I have to say, I've been avoiding that word since it became a book title, but it's a hard word to avoid.
Dancing around has been very difficult given the president's actual behavior. Yes, and this is a reflection of multiple things. One, again, 20-something years ago, the president spelling something wrong in public and correcting a child was a week-long news story. Now, literally, we have a new controversy. If a scandal is happening, it must be a day that ends in Y with this administration. But the larger issue, again, is this. You have a president who is constantly screaming and attacking an investigation as to whether or not he tries to stop people from investigating him. And that's part of the issue. He is confirming everything that they're trying to find out about him. And I'll say this very quickly about Don McGahn. Look, this is a guy with a long, extensive history in Washington, D.C. The FCC and the FEC, he was in the Abramoff case with Tom DeLay. This guy knows how to stay out of trouble. And so he's definitely going to reveal whatever it is he needs to reveal to Mueller, because he's got a career that he wants to extend beyond what this presidency may be able to handle.
Ron Klain, the most important phrase that I've read in all of this reporting about the McGahn interviews with the special prosecutor is the New York Times describing that Don McGahn has given them the president's mindset. The mindset on the firing of James Comey. Yeah. And so that can change what Rudy Giuliani and the president are trying to set up as a he said conflict, meaning James Comey says the president said something to him and about Flynn, and the president denies he ever said that about Flynn. Well, what if there is someone else in the White House who can actually confirm that the president did say something like what Jim Comey says the president said?
Yeah, Lawrence, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a key thing. The hardest thing about proving an obstruction of justice case is proving that what the president did was with an intent to obstruct justice, to impede the investigation. And Don McGahn had a ringside seat for that intent and was involved in these various acts that Trump did, firing Comey, demanding that Mueller be fired, and actions taken against Rosenstein. So, he is a critical witness here, a critical part of it. And if you take a step back, you look at it, Lawrence, you've got a White House counsel now talking to prosecutors. You've got someone running around who taped the West Wing. You've got a president with an enemies list. We're just a few ABBA songs away from a remake of the 1970s. And that's what we're seeing. This looks like the Nixon White House all over again.
And Ken Dilanian, I want to go to something that the president said in an interview with Reuters today. And the president hastily arranged this interview with Reuters. And I think it's fair for us to consider that it might have been arranged in direct response to the New York Times reporting this weekend about Don McGahn's cooperation. And in it, the president is echoing something that Rudy Giuliani just keeps saying relentlessly. And this is about the so-called, what they call the possible perjury trap. This is the president talking to Reuters. He says, so if I say something that Comey says something, and it's my word against his, and he's best friends with Mueller, so Mueller might say, well, I believe Comey, and even if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar. That's no good. Now, Ken, the Don McGahn reporting, as I say, interests me most when it comes to the possibility that Don McGahn might be able to change the Comey versus Trump story from Comey's word versus Trump's word to Trump's word versus Comey's word, plus possibly something from Don McGahn.
100%, Lawrence. But first, a word about that tweet. It's inconsistent with the facts and it's inconsistent with American values. That's not a partisan statement. Robert Mueller volunteered for Vietnam, was wounded in combat, led the FBI after 9/11. There are prosecutors on that team with sterling records. Greg Andres, who is the lead prosecutor in the Manafort case, took out the Bonanno crime family in New York, got so far into their skin that they threatened to kill him. He had 24/7 security for a year. These are public servants who have given over their careers to serving the American public and bringing people to justice. Donald Trump may not like what they're doing, but he is sounding like every politician I've ever reported on who's been under criminal investigation by the FBI. And you're absolutely right, Don McGahn could be a crucial witness. And this story in the Washington Post, where sources are suggesting he didn't incriminate the president, I read that as this is the Giuliani philosophy that the president can't obstruct justice because he can fire whoever he wants for any reason. I don't think that Robert Mueller believes that. I don't think a lot of legal experts believe that. If he fired Comey for corrupt reasons, if he asked Comey to go easy on Flynn for corrupt reasons, and if McGahn can help Mueller establish that, that's obstruction of justice. Now, Mueller, I don't think, is going to indict the president. A Justice Department doctrine says you can't charge a sitting president, but I think we're moving towards a comprehensive report that's going to go to Congress that may be more damning than we can possibly imagine sitting here right now.
Ken, I'm so glad you went back to the president's tweet that he begins by calling Bob Mueller disgraced and discredited, which is just the most disgraceful thing that this president could possibly say about Bob Mueller as a person. If he wants to criticize his prosecutorial work, that is one thing, but I'm so glad you went back to that. And also, Ken, this point that the president is the White House is putting out tonight, clearly coming from the White House to the Washington Post, that, oh no, Don McGahn's lawyer has told us that he did not incriminate the president. That could mean anything. That could mean that Don McGahn's lawyer has told them, Don McGahn did not say, I saw the president commit a crime. I saw the president commit obstruction of justice. But Don McGahn could have told them exactly what he saw the president do, and the prosecutors could decide what they've just heard is a crime.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the New York Times, which seems to have a pipeline into Don McGahn and his version of events, has already reported extensively on these episodes, right? That Trump insisted that McGahn help him fire Mueller, and McGahn refused to carry out that order because he thought it was improper. That Trump was pressuring people around him to get rid of Jeff Sessions, or was moving forward with a plan to fire Jeff Sessions. All of that, I think, is deeply relevant, and McGahn can bring Mueller inside the Oval Office into those intimate conversations. And the bizarre thing about this, Lawrence, is, you know, the White House could have asserted executive privilege, and they could have at least tried to prevent some of this interview. I mean, they may have lost, but they could have strung it out. They didn't do that. And that went to the earlier legal strategy of Ty Cobb and John Dowd, Donald Trump's former lawyers who are no longer there, to fully cooperate with the Mueller investigation. And also, according to the New York Times, McGahn deciding that he felt that Trump was setting him up to take the fall. So he was going to go in there with his lawyer and tell Mueller everything and do 30 hours of interviews. And we heard Steve Schmidt, a Republican political consultant on Nicole Wallace's show today, who said, I know Don McGahn very well. I had an office next to him. He is not going to go to jail and be disbarred for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus of people who know Don McGahn. Ken Delaney and Ron Klain, Jason Johnson, thanks for starting us off tonight. And when we come back, Michael Cohen is now reportedly being investigated for bank fraud, $20 million of bank fraud. So does that make Michael Cohen $20 million more eager to cooperate with federal prosecutors and tell them everything he knows about Donald Trump? And later in the hour, the woman married to the biggest cyber bully in the world gave a little speech today about cyberbullying prevention while her husband was cyberbullying. Now, I don't want to ruin the suspense by telling you exactly who those two people are, so you're just gonna have to stick around to find out. Michael Cohen woke up today to a front page story in his hometown newspaper, the New York Times, outlining the charges federal prosecutors are considering in their investigation of Michael Cohen. The New York Times reports that Michael Cohen could face charges of bank fraud in obtaining $20 million in loans from two obscure New York banks that most New Yorkers have never heard of. The Times reports the bank loans under scrutiny, the total of which has not been previously reported, came from two financial institutions in the New York region that have catered to the taxi industry, Sterling National Bank and Melrose Credit Union, according to business records and people with knowledge of the matter, including a banker who reviewed the transactions. Publicly filed financing statements indicate that Mr. Cohen used 32 taxi medallions as collateral for the Sterling loans. The medallions were then valued at more than $1 million each and generated more than $1 million a year in income. Michael Cohen's partner in the taxi business, Yevgeny Friedman, is already a cooperating witness with federal prosecutors, and an accountant who worked for both Mr. Cohen and Mr. Friedman has testified before the grand jury in the Cohen case. The New York Times reports that if Michael Cohen becomes a cooperating witness with government prosecutors, quote, a cooperation agreement would likely include a provision that Mr. Cohen also provide information to the special counsel Robert S. Mueller III. And joining our discussion now, Michael Daly, columnist for the Daily Beast, who has been covering New York City for decades. He's also a longtime columnist for the New York Daily News. And Ron Klain is back with us. And Michael, the taxi business has been a cash business for a very long time. You thought real estate was bad.
Yeah. Look at these guys.
Yeah, the one thing that can be much dirtier than commercial real estate in New York, the taxi business. So it's starting to feel like Michael Cohen has 20 million more reasons now to cooperate with special
actually, I thought it was kind of good news for him, because if you look at the application for the search warrant, they talked about many crimes. Mm-hmm. I mean, this narrows it down to a few multi-million-dollar crimes. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you start looking at the taxi. I mean, the first guy he was business partners with, well, he had a problem because he was charging fake late fees. The latest guy, Gene, he got a problem because he was raking millions of dollars that was supposed to go to the subways. Mm-hmm. He's actually the only winner in the whole Trump-Russian saga so far is Gene Friedman. It looks like he was going to go to state prison, not some federal. State prison for 25 years, maybe. And all of a sudden, hey, I can give up Michael Cohen.
Because luckily for Friedman, there's something more interesting to prosecutors than Friedman because of the Trump investigation. Ron Klain, the President of the United States could be in very big trouble because of the taxi business in New York and his buddy Michael Cohen drowning in legal problems because of it.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Cohen turns out to be a crook. Who could have seen that coming, huh? I mean, I think it's true, Lawrence, that he could be in trouble, but I think even truer is he may already be in a lot of trouble. That as we're focused on whether or not Michael Cohen is going to offer additional evidence to the special counsel, but we need to remember that the most important evidence Michael Cohen probably has is those millions of pages of records that Bob Mueller already has, that a special master looked at and only set aside a few thousand pages out of millions as being covered by the attorney-client privilege. And those records, aren't going to have the reliability issues that Michael Cohen's testimony is going to have. They're not going to have all the different ways it can be impeached that Michael Cohen's testimony can be. So I do think it's an interesting issue how much farther Michael Cohen does go. Does he, quote-unquote, flip? But Mueller may already have in his pocket most of what he wants from Michael Cohen.
And Michael Daly, you've sat in courtrooms here in New York City watching what the world thought were the toughest guys in the world who had taken La Cosa Nostra blood oath to never testify against each other. More of those guys cracked than you can remember.
Joe Messina, everybody says, toughest man ever lived, never be a rat.
Right, and so
him.
Right, and here's Donald Trump today tweeting about, who's going to be a rat in his world.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that, I mean, first of all, the President of the United States is supposed to stand for justice. Mm-hmm. And rats are supposed to, people are actually leading you towards justice. So he's calling him a rat. But the other thing is, how can a guy be a rat if he's not giving up something, if there isn't something to give up? Everybody talks about, well, Michael Cohen's going to flip. I mean, you can stop someone on the street and say, are you going to flip on Trump?
Yeah.
There's nothing to give. But all of a sudden, there's this kind of implicit thing that there is something to give up.
Yeah, and Ron, what about that? It's not. You're saying it's not clear to you that Michael Cohen has enough of value for Robert Mueller.
Well, as I said, I think the files are the big thing. I think the records are the big thing. They're reliable. They're provable. He may well have more. And, obviously, we haven't talked tonight about his role in the payoffs to women who, like Stormy Daniels, who allegedly had a relationship with Donald Trump. And there's a lot of things there. Were there federal campaign finance violations involved in that and the way that helped the Trump campaign? But, what I think when you step back, what you see is, we have the White House counsel offering evidence against Trump. You have now his personal lawyer potentially offering evidence against Trump. And these people, they wouldn't have anything to say if there weren't criminal activity, if there wasn't something they're trying to protect themselves from because of what went wrong and what was wrongly done here. And I think, that's the big picture. People coming to testify against Trump, they only have something to testify if Trump did something wrong.
Ron Klain, Michael Daly, thank you both for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. When we come back, President Trump actually thinks he can replace Robert Mueller with himself. Today, President Trump actually said that he could replace Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller with himself. In an interview with Reuters, the president said he could take over the special prosecutor's investigation. Quote, "I can go in and I could do whatever. I could run it if I want. But I decided to stay out. I'm totally allowed to be involved if I wanted to be. So far, I haven't chosen to be involved. I'll stay out." And again today, the president is back on the attack against his own attorney general, who he has publicly urged to quit and privately attempted to fire. In one tweet, the president referred to Jeff Sessions' Justice Department with the word justice in quotes. In his Reuters interview today, the president did not rule out stripping Robert Mueller of his security clearance, which would greatly inhibit Robert Mueller's investigation of the Russian attack on our presidential election. The president said, "I haven't given it a lot of thought," when asked about Mueller's security clearance. Today, more than 175 former government officials signed a statement in support of former CIA Director John Brennan after the president stripped his security clearance last week. Yesterday, John Brennan repeated what he told Rachel Maddow Friday night.
Well, I have been contacted by a number of lawyers, and they have already given me their thoughts about the basis for a complaint, an injunction, to try to prevent him from doing this in the future. If my clearances and my reputation, as I'm being pulled through the mud now, if that's the price we're going to pay to prevent Donald Trump from doing this against other people, to me, it's a small price to pay. So I am going to do whatever I can personally to try to prevent these abuses in the future. And if it means going to court, I will do that.
And in a footnote to Meet the Press yesterday, just when you thought Rudy Giuliani was beyond parody, he found a way to parody himself.
Look, I'm not going to be rushed into having him testify so that he gets trapped into perjury. And when you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Truth is truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
Joining our discussion now, Jennifer Rubin, a conservative opinion writer at The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Also joining us is David Rothkopf, CEO of the Rothkopf Group and host of Deep State Radio and a visiting scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And Jennifer, we could have a new special prosecutor of Donald Trump. That would be Donald Trump when he takes over the investigation of himself.
By the way, my favorite part of that Meet the Press interview was Chuck Todd putting his head in his hands as if, like, I couldn't have written this. My God, what are you saying, man? Yeah, this is Trump's craziness. And on one hand, we can laugh at it because it's so absurd and it's so contrary to the way our government operates. But in another way, it is very telling. We keep looking for the obvious. It's hiding in plain sight. Trump thinks he can use the Justice Department as his personal lawyers to protect him. This is more corrupt intent. It's staring us in the face every day. It comes out in these tweets. It comes out in the way he talks about Mueller and the way he talks about Jeff Sessions. So, yes, it's very amusing because it's so crackpotish and so evidently Trump, but there is a serious side to it, I think.
And David, the president can fire the attorney general. He can fire the deputy attorney general. He can pretty much rip that investigation apart.
Yeah, sure, he can do that. And of course, that's what's troubling about having a president who is as cray as Trump is. And right now, he's kind of cray to the craydiest power. You know, abnormal has become the new normal. Every day we have not one, not two, but half a dozen things. You know, you didn't list the fact that he said that he kind of likes Kim Jong-un today and he'd like to meet with Kim Jong-un. We didn't talk about the fact that he thought Manafort was a good guy and that, you know, it was a horrible thing that was being done to him. Every single day he violates norms. But I think the thing that we need to keep in mind as we look forward on this thing is that someday we're going to be looking back at all this and saying, these were the good old days. These were the days when the pressure wasn't high. There wasn't a Democratic Congress that was running 11 investigations and looking at his books. His son wasn't in the dock. His daughter wasn't in the dock. His son-in-law wasn't in the dock. And, you know, when that pressure builds up on him, and God forbid we have some kind of international crisis, which we haven't had, this kind of level of craziness is gonna look good by comparison, because the guy is clearly losing his grip.
And Jennifer, we saw the tweets get more hysterical as the pressure builds. He's just like a machine that way almost. When the New York Times comes out and reports that the White House counsel is cooperating, we see the president today go to a new level of hysteria.
Yeah, the tweets are the most, I think, helpful window into his mind, into his psyche, because they are unfiltered and he cannot help himself. There is no grand strategy here, folks. The notion that he's playing three-dimensional chess or five-dimensional chess is ridiculous. This is his impulsivity. This is his crazed, confused thinking. This is his anger. This is more helpful, probably, than anything other than putting him under oath, because it's the real Trump.
David, John Brennan publicly allowing for the possibility that he's considering what to do legally in terms of suing about the loss of his security clearance, not for himself, as he puts it, but possibly to establish a precedent about this. Rudy Giuliani out there tonight tweeting, saying, please sue. You know, the president taunting today, saying we want him to sue so that we can go into discovery against him. It would be a complicated issue for John Brennan to decide to do this.
Well, I think it might be a complicated issue, but of course, you know, there are traditional processes that are followed for removing people's security clearances, both within agencies and from beyond agencies, and they typically involve due process. They typically involve proving that there is some kind of national security issue that's come at stake as a result of it. And I think the burden of proof on the president and the accusers of Brennan would be more difficult than it would be for Brennan, who is one of the most distinguished public servants we've had, one of the really outstanding leaders the intelligence community has produced, and is absolutely an apolitical actor. This is a guy who simply has devoted himself to U.S. public service for the past 25 years. And so, you know, I think, you know, Rudy Giuliani, again, that was another unhinged tweet that's a parody of a parody. I don't think Rudy Giuliani wants to get into that fight, because it won't just be Brennan. It will be the entire intelligence community that's going to line up behind him, because they see this as a threat to the independence of the intelligence community, which is a threat to U.S. national security.
And Jennifer, John Brennan proudly served 3 Republican presidents, 3 Democratic presidents. He has, in his professional life, no partisan history whatsoever.
And you have a long list of people who are everything from Congressional Medal of, not Medal of Honor, but Presidential Medal of Honor recipients, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipients, people who have been honored by West Point in the person of Leon Panetta. He wants to take away all of their security clearances. But I think this is important for another reason, and this is because it is the practice for when he decides to do this to Mueller. And it's important right now that the intelligence community speak as one voice, that Congress, if they can ever get their act together, if Republicans ever decide to show any spine whatsoever, not likely, but certainly for Democrats to get their act together, because if he goes down that route, then we really are, I think, at a constitutional crisis point. So it's important to speak up now. It's important for the intelligence community to really not tolerate this whatsoever. And you do see just a phalanx of these people moving forward now. 175 people in one letter, 6 60 people in another. So they are certainly showing their patriotic stripes by not responding to an attack on an individual or from an individual, but standing up for American principles, for democratic norms. What a concept.
Jennifer Rubin and David Rothkopf, thank you for joining us tonight. And when we come back, Melania Trump actually said this today: we share one goal, to pave a smooth way forward for our children. But she certainly did not mean the 565 children who still remain separated from their parents because her husband ordered them to be separated from their parents. Here's a promise that then candidate Donald Trump made in August of 2016.
Oh, and by the way, they said my wife Melania might have come in illegally. Can you believe that one? No. They said, headlines, maybe she came in illegally, maybe. Let me tell you one thing. She has got it so documented, so she's going to have a little news conference over the next couple of weeks. That's good. That's good. I love it. I love it. They said, Melania Trump may have come into our country illegally, and how would that be for Donald Trump?
She's going to have a little news conference over the next couple of weeks. That was 2 years and 11 days ago. Donald Trump knew that his campaign supporters harbored many hatreds. Some of them hated taxes. Some of them hated Obamacare, or thought they did. Some of them, like David Duke, hated all people who are not white. But the one hatred that all Trump supporters seemed to share enthusiastically was hatred of illegal immigration, hatred of the people who, as Donald Trump would put it, come into our country illegally. And so, when credible reports emerged of Melania Trump possibly working illegally in this country when she first arrived on a tourist visa, Donald Trump told his fans not to worry. She has got it so documented, he said. She's going to have a little news conference over the next couple of weeks. And then Melania Trump remained absolutely silent about her immigration history and her immigration documents. The next couple of weeks passed and she didn't say a word about her immigration history. But finally today, 2 years and 11 days after Donald Trump made that promise, Melania Trump finally stepped up to a microphone and said this.
Good morning. It is great to be here with all of you today. I'm honored to open this important summit on cyberbullying prevention, and want to start by thanking each of you for your commitment to the topic.
And so once again, the only First Lady in history who, in Donald Trump's words, as he put it 2 years ago, quote, may have come into our country illegally, still has not had that little news conference that Donald Trump promised where she would reveal all of the details of her immigration history and put out her immigration documents, show them to us, prove she did not come here illegally or ever work here illegally, ever. And instead, today, she spoke for 4 whole minutes on cyberbullying prevention. She read words on the teleprompter that were written for her by her staff, and so she never mentioned the biggest cyber bully in the world. She never offered her invaluable perspective on how you bring up a 12-year-old boy in an American household with a 72-year-old father who is not just a cyber bully, but is the biggest cyber bully in history. No president in our lifetime has been better at publicly ignoring the First Lady than Donald Trump. He won that title on the first day of his presidency by forgetting about his wife as soon as he arrived at the White House. And he did it again today by not just completely ignoring that his wife held a public event today, something she almost never does, but then by publicly violating the principles that his wife was talking about today by spending so much of his day after her speech trying to cyberbully everyone, from a former CIA director to the current special prosecutor to thousands of people working in the Justice Department. And so today, the First Lady read a very short statement about cyberbullying, and the president spent his day cyberbullying. And neither one of them did a thing for the 565 children still in President Trump's custody after being ripped out of their parents' arms at the southern border. Neither one of them have done a thing for those children, not one thing. They haven't helped reunite a single child with a single parent.
We share one goal: to pave a smooth way forward for our children.
How can she say that? How can she say those words? A smooth way forward for our children. She supported the presidential campaign of the man who was already the world's biggest cyber bully. She supports the presidency that has ripped thousands of children from their parents' arms at the southern border. Thousands. She supports the president who ripped those families apart because he said they came here illegally. And she has never proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she first came to this country legally and worked in this country legally when she began working here. She has never proved that. There won't be a smooth way forward for the 565 children still in Trump custody because Melania Trump's husband has deported 366 parents of those children. Melania Trump's husband has completely lost track of 26 of those parents and has no idea how to reunite those parents. Melania Trump's husband forced 154 parents to sign away their rights to be reunited with their children when those parents did not know what they were signing.
We share one goal: to pave a smooth way forward for our children.
Melania Trump has done nothing for our children. Nothing. And Donald Trump has done far too much to our children.
In today's global society, social media is an inevitable part of our children's daily lives. It can be used in many positive ways, but can also be destructive and harmful when used incorrectly.
And Jennifer Rubin is back with us. And Jennifer, we don't know what was written on the back of the First Lady's coat when she was saying that today, but we do know she wore the garment saying, "I don't care," when she went to the southern border. She seems to have proven that since her return. Here she is worried about cyberbullying and not expressing one word of concern about the children who are in Trump custody.
Correct. And of course, as you said earlier, not paying one whit of attention to the worst cyber bullier of them all, who sets an appalling example for all of us. You know, maybe she should go talk to Twitter and ask them to take bullies off their platform. That would be kind of helpful, and perhaps that would take care of the Trump problem. I think the problem I have with Melania is being a first lady is a great opportunity to do good. It is to do good for others. And she has done virtually nothing. This be great or be better kind of platform. There was one little White House event in the Rose Garden, and she comes and gives this ridiculous little 4-minute speech. She's not doing anything for America. You look at all the first ladies that preceded her, whether it was Barbara Bush, whether it was Laura Bush on literacy, whether it was the Obamas, and specifically their work with veterans and their families. Every first lady has championed causes. Every first lady has done good. What has she done? Virtually nothing. And they say, oh, she's a private person. You know what? She now has an obligation to do good. When you get to that position, I don't think you have a right to just stay home and have silly little press conferences like this. I think it's time for her to get active, for her to show some public-mindedness. Although I will say that she did decide to take her first public trip. And maybe this is a little bit of trolling, Lawrence. She decided to go to Africa, which her husband once described as a bunch of blank, 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 whole countries. So perhaps that's a little needling on her part. But if she comes up with something that is remotely in the realm of what, for example, President Bush did with respect to AIDS, I would be stunned. These people are about empty gestures. They're about themselves. They are fundamentally selfish people.
Yeah, in the announcement of the trip, it was an announcement of a trip to a continent. I'm not sure that the First Lady's office knows that Africa is not a country. When these trips are announced by previous White Houses, they announce countries. They don't say it's a trip to Europe. They don't say it's a trip to Asia or South America. They announce specific countries. I'm not sure that this First Lady's office knows any countries that they could name in Africa. Jennifer Rubin, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tonight's Last Word is next. Time for tonight's Last Word.
Hundreds of newspapers denounced Trump's attacks on the media in coordinated editorials. Ooh, that'll get him. This initiative was spearheaded by the Boston Globe, which led the charge with their editorial, "The free press is wicked smart. Donald Trump has gone too far." The perfect Boston accent. Perfect Boston accent. Was Mark Wahlberg just in here?
Stephen Colbert gets tonight's wicked smart last word. This weekend, Rudy Giuliani changed his story about the Trump Tower meeting, but does he even know that he changed his own story? That is in the 11th hour with Brian Williams, which starts now.
Hi, I'm Nate Ryan, host of the NASCAR and NBC podcast. Every week, we're talking to drivers, crew chiefs, and other personalities in the NASCAR industry. So subscribe to the NASCAR and NBC podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.